And welcome back to Oilers Live Podcast. This is with Sean from theoilnight.ca and Kelly from beerleagueheroes.com for the second half of our prospect episode. We're going to be going through picks number 6 through 10. Both Sean and Kelly each have a pick for each that they may or may not agree on. I'm hoping they disagree on each one so that we have a fun podcast today. We are going to get right into it and start with Kelly on who you'd pick at number 6.
All right, so who I have at number 6 is a kid out of the U.S. National Development Team program named Oliver Wahlstrom. From what I can gather, he's one of the pure skill forwards in the whole draft. And this year, to date, he's playing for the U18 team. And he's got 31 goals in 38 games. And for the U20 team, he's got 15 goals in 15 games for them. He's slated to go to Harvard next season. He's 6'1", nearly 200 pounds, center right wing. I think this is a good player for, like, maybe if the Oilers want to start stacking up some skill in their system a bit.
So the one thing I heard about Wahlstrom is in this year's draft, he is probably the one guy that has already an NHL caliber shot.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm big on him. I mean, we were talking earlier on the first half as to who might move up a little bit. He could move into 5th spot ahead of Buckfist, if you ask me. I'd have a hard time seeing him move ahead of Tkachuk, but still pretty good player. And I actually like the fact that he's going to Harvard next year. That could be could be a thing in his favor, right? Go and get some seasoning in the NCAA. Anyway, let's move on. Sean, your thoughts on number 6?
So number 6, I've got Noah Dobson at number 6. I kind of hum and hawed about this a little bit. I mean, he's a right shot defenseman, as we know, and he plays for Acadia Bathurst in the QMJHL. He's got a point per game right now over there, and he's just got a nice blend of offense and good defense. He's a heck of a skater. I tweeted out there a little while ago. They did the skills competition there at the prospects game, and he ended up getting, I think he was third in the fastest skater going forward. This is amongst all forwards and defensemen. He was third, and then skating backwards, he was first out of all the prospects, and then skating backwards with the puck, he was also first. So he's 6'3". He's a big guy that can skate. There are a little bit of questions about his offensive flair, even though he does have a point per game. Some question his offensive ceiling a little bit. Personally, I think because of the speed, I think he does have a good shot. I think it's something that will develop over time. But he's a great two-way defenseman, and I kind of compare him to. I see a lot of similarities him and Alex Pietrangelo when he got to St. Louis, especially. I mean, he was very sound defensively, and it took a little bit to get his offense going, but they're kind of the similar build and similar size. I think, Dobson, he could kind of step in day one and help solidify a defensive core. So I've got him at number 6.
So you've got him obviously up a little bit on, I think NHL Central has him at number 8 right now, but he's certainly, I think everybody knows, right? The right shot D, such a valuable commodity in this league. Like, yeah, I could take him at 6. I mean, you develop a guy like that, and you're not asking for that right shot anymore. All right, and let's move on. Kelly, we'll start with you, Sean. This is where the Oilers would pick at if we were to have the draft today. So there's 2 things I want you to do. One is who do you have at number 7? And if you were the Oilers at number 7, who would you take? So they may or may not be the same. let's start with you, Sean.
Well, who I have at number 7 is Ty Smith, who I think the Oilers will take. They need forwards for sure. Although, they could probably use a guy like this to run their power play. So I'm gonna stick with Ty Smith. He'll be number 7. He'll be the Oilers' pick at number 7. The thing I like about him, he's such a terrific skater. He takes the puck out of his own zone. He can go coast to coast, and he can run a power play. He can walk the blue line. He's got such a booming, accurate shot. Definitely something that the Oilers could use. I know the Draft Analyst is really high on this player. There's a lot of reviews about his leadership qualities, what kind of speaks to me as well. That's always a plus. And he's got tremendous vision and poise. I've watched him a few times. I wasn't overly impressed with his prospects game. I think he was a little bit nervous. In fact, he might have had one of the worst performances there, but you could still see that the skating was there. And I think overall, it's another guy that's, again, he's kind of a little bit smaller. He's 5'11", but he's only 170 pounds. A little bit smaller, but he's just one of those new age defensemen where he can just come in and just, the zone exits are outstanding, and the passing is outstanding, and to quarterback that power play, I think it would be a nice compliment to the Oilers for sure. It may ultimately end up meaning a guy like Clefbaum gets moved, but I think he's a very talented kid, and again, all the other intangibles, you add all those up, I think he's the number 7 pick.
And have you had a chance to watch any of the Chiefs games or not? I know you're an OHL guy, so it's quite possible you haven't.
Well, yeah, no, I do. I have watched a few games. Luckily, Sportsnet has had a few games on there, and I do watch. I try and watch as much video as possible, and I did watch all the prospects game too, where he played. So I've kind of got a bit of a good feel for him, but I certainly rely on, as far as the intangibles, the leadership qualities and his hockey IQ. People again, at the Draft Analyst watches him all the time. They can't speak enough about this kid. So I think if I combine that with all the skating and everything else that I've seen, I think he's going to be a keeper.
Yeah, I think maybe what's most remarkable about him is how he does shine, and he's certainly on a team where you could easily fall into the shadows, right? Everybody knows Kyler Yamamoto, but Ty Smith is still coming out night after night and producing and doing what he does. So. All right. Now, Kelly, number 7. So again, who would you take at number 7 if just in terms of rankings? And then if you were the Oilers today, who would you take at number 7?
At number 7, I've got Quinn Hughes from University of Michigan. He's a little guy. I'm not sure. They say he's 5'9". I'm not sure. You could go either way depending on which scout found the report. But he is a tiny guy, but he might be the best skater in the draft. He's so good at rushing the puck. His edge work is fantastic. He's really, really smart in the offensive zone as well. They say he's like a kind of like a transition king. If you need a defenseman that can help your transition game for your team, and Quinn Hughes is the guy. I think if I were the Oilers, this would be a player that I'd consider, just for his transition game. At the University of Michigan, he's got 16 points in 25 games, 1 goal, 15 assists. So he's a little guy, but we've seen players like this succeed in the past, and he would get enough time to marinate in the NCAA and the minors a little bit too. So I like him, even though he's a tiny guy. I like him a lot.
Yeah, and he's a defender. You think? Every time I think of small defenders, I always think of Marc-Andre Bergeron.
Yeah, it's not that far off.
Yeah.
But we're talking about elite level skating here.
Yeah.
With this kid, his end to ends are phenomenal.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So that's number 7. So at number 7, you'd both take who you each had projected there. So again, we'll just repeat that. Sean said he'd take Ty Smith, and Kelly take Quinn Hughes. Both good picks, both solid guys. I think, in my opinion, both of them probably need a year or two before they make it into the NHL. But no doubt both be good players once they get there. And Kelly, we'll start with you. You're number 8 in terms of ranking.
My number 8's a little off the board today. It wouldn't have been at the beginning of the year, but it's Joe Veleno from Drummondville. He, as we all know, he had the exceptional player status in the KMJHL and started, as a 16 or 15-year-old? What does that mean?
That's that I'm not sure.
16. 15. I can't remember. Who cares? Anyways, he got traded to Drummondville, and he's been lighting it up so far. When he was on a line with Oilers prospect Ostap Safin, if you recall, in St. John, and for whatever reason they kind of shit the bed building that team, and it didn't progress to the level they wanted. So they shipped out Veleno for a handful, and Drummondville picked him up, and Drummondville is one of the better teams in the CHL this year. And he's got 28 points in 16 games. I think just in his last 3 games, he has 8 or 9 points. And so this is a good thing. He's got the size. He's over 6 feet, 6'1", I think. He's getting up there, 190 pounds. The thing I like about Veleno is that he draws the defender to him. He wants that defenseman or that forward to come to him so that he can open the ice for his teammates. Right? He's an exceptional playmaker. I think he's more of a passer than he is a shooter. But from what I've seen online, I really like. He's a very hard worker, and I think he'll be a safe pick for an NHL team. Maybe a second line center or a very good third line center.
Yeah, and so today I think if team was picking in 8th, we'd be looking at Florida. Maybe, is that right? Anyway, so at 8th, you've got Veleno. I think he's, for most part, most people project him over in the past the top 10, but you're right, he's lighting it up in the queue, no doubt. So now, Sean, at number 8.
Well, before I do that, just the one thing I want to touch on just quickly with Hughes is I'm not the biggest fan of Hughes. I kind of compare him almost to Ryan Merkley and Guelph. They're very similar players, kind of undersized, tremendous skaters. But I do worry about the defensive side of the game. I know in the World Juniors there, he was kind of benched there until the 3rd period because he was a bit of a liability defensively, I think. So I do worry a little bit about him. I think there is a bit of high risk because he is so small and he does struggle defensively. I do wonder about him in the top 10, but just a quick tidbit on that. His brother, too, Jack Hughes, will probably be the first overall pick next year as well. So it's definitely he's got a pedigree in his family. So that's I guess something to keep an eye out for. But for number 8, I've got Oliver Wahlstrom. Kelly had him a little bit higher. I could totally see it. I mean, he's kind of your prototypical power forward. Again, I don't think he's quite on the Tkachuk level, but he's close. I mean, he's a very physical player. He's not the fastest guy in the world, it looks like, but he makes a lot of good decisions on the ice. He's just a pure goal scorer. I kind of see, just watching a lot of highlights, and I kind of see a bit of Billy Guerin in his game. A little bit nasty and that big shot. So that's where I've got. That's where I've got number 8 is Oliver Wahlstrom.
Yeah, and what is it, do you think, about Wahlstrom, though, that doesn't put him up higher for you? I mean, I think he's definitely, my opinion is he's a 6 guy, and who could go, as I said, maybe even higher, maybe 5th. But what's your thought? Like, why would you drop him down to 8?
Well, I think you got to kind of just compare everything, just kind of put in perspective who's available and team needs and that. The thing with Wahlstrom, I don't see a dynamic player. I don't think anything that jumps out. I just see him as a really, really good player with a good shot. Typically, and again, I'm not a pro scout by any means. Typically, I look for elite skills. If I'm going to draft in the top 10, I'm looking for elite players. And I mean, when we do this list, I'm certainly going by not where I think people will be drafted, but who I think talent-wise, where they rank. And again, Wahlstrom, I think it's kind of a...
I just hold on. Somebody's mowing the lawn outside of Kelly's place there.
No problem.
All right. Sorry. Now carry on.
I'm just saying, with Wahlstrom, I just think it's, first of all, I think the defensemen are going to be a higher need, but I also think Wahlstrom, he's not quite on the Tkachuk level. And again, he projects to be a really good player. I'm not sure if he's an elite player. So that's why I have him a little bit further down.
Yeah, no, that's fair. All right, and Sean, you're going to start. We're actually moving through quite well in these, but you're going to start on number 9.
Okay, so number 9. So I kind of struggled when we were going through this, and again, when we break it all down, it kind of comes down to me. It kind of comes down to translatable NHL skills versus junior production. So I don't care how much a player is doing in junior, how many points he gets. Because a lot of these could be, tips or deflections or bad goals or whatever. I look for how he scores the goals, not how many he scores or how many points he gets. So when I was breaking down with Dobson and Bouchard, kind of breaking down the tape and seeing which one was better, which one projected at the NHL level, it was really close. But I think Dobson's speed kind of set him apart over Bouchard. But Bouchard himself is an excellent player, so I've got him at number 9. He plays for the London Knights. He's an offensive defenseman. I don't think he is elite in any aspect other than maybe his vision and his poise. He's so calm and cool in his own zone. If the puck's in his own zone, if somebody dumps it in, his zone exits are just fantastic. And on the power play, he's got such a quick release in his shot. It's just, teams don't even have a chance to block it. He just gets it off so quick. I actually compare him to John Carlson, who used to play for the Knights a long time ago. Very similar players, two-way players, heady players, leadership qualities, very solid overall, not necessarily dynamic, but certainly has offensive upside. The only downside with him maybe is he might be a bit of a defensive liability. He does take dumb penalties sometimes and makes some questionable plays in his own zone. But for the most part, as far as projecting to the next level, he has a lot of skills, a lot of talent. So I've got him at number 9.
Yeah, and I assume you've seen lots of Bouchard him playing in London. Yeah. Okay, I actually don't have much to say about Bouchard. I've not seen any clips or really paid much attention to him, but which, maybe I should, him being you being a semi-regular guest now. I've only had 12 episodes, so that makes you a pretty big part of the program.
Well, I should make you aware that in the OHL he's played 49 games and he has 18 goals, 45 assists. He's got 63 points. He leads the team, and I believe he leads the NHL as defenseman in points. So he's certainly got an offensive style to his game. But again, the funny thing is, you watch London every year. They're putting out player after player. They're putting in the NHL, and even was it 2 years ago? Ole Juolevi went 5th overall to Vancouver. Well, even if you just compare Bouchard to Ole Juolevi, Bouchard is the better player than Juolevi. But this draft is deeper than it was back then, and I think Juolevi was kind of taken a little bit higher than he should have been. I still think Sergachev was the better defenseman at that time, but that's for another day. But yeah, Bouchard is definitely. He's definitely an offensive defenseman for now. But again, you got to look at the NHL. How is that going to translate? And I think he's a step slower than Dobson, a little bit smaller than Dobson. I think overall Dobson is the better defenseman when he gets to the NHL. So that's why I've got him below him.
All right. And Kelly, you're up at number 9.
Well, this sucks because I got the same player. And Sean just did the whole report for me.
Fight.
Yeah, I think what I like about him, he seems to be a very calm, well-sized defender. I like that he puts up offense in the OHL from the point. I think that's important for kind of profiling a player and how they'll translate into the NHL. I do like that Sean. He's a captain, right?
He is, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been a captain as a very young 17-year-old, no?
Yeah, well, they traded half their team at the trade deadline, so he, so they gave him. I mean, he's a natural leader, though, so it was a no-brainer to make him captain.
Yeah, so he's a young guy. He gets the C in his draft year. He doesn't have a lot of veterans around him to insulate, and he doesn't need it. And I like that. I like that about that defenseman. So I can't really say anything more than what Sean has. He kind of went through it all.
Sean also has the advantage. He gets to watch him play, right?
And
I got home field advantage, yeah.
He gets to buy beer after the game, too.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it's. I assume you've probably met all these players, Sean, have you, or not?
Well, yeah, I don't meet the young ones anymore, really. I don't have much of a social life other than my basement. But, when you have kids, that's kind of how it is. But yeah, back in the day, we used to meet all the players out there at the bars or whatever. London's kind of it's a big city, but it's a small town kind of thing, So, yeah. Oh,
good. Yeah, I didn't realize Bouchard was captain on the team. That's a big kid, right? 6'2", 180 pounds. It's good size going into your draft year. I think we just had Tampa through town. I mean, you look at their D. That's exactly what they got. And again, another right-hander. That's a pretty big deal. Yeah. So Kelly, let's go to number 10. Who you got at number 10?
The player I have at number 10, I couldn't gather a whole lot of information about him. Sean will have more than I do because he's an OHL guy. He's Barrett Hayton from Sault Ste. Marie. From what I can gather, he's very strong two ways. He's very hearty player. He's got a lot of grit, plays with a lot of soul. And he's not flashy, but he can play the game very well. It's like Derek Sutton from Youngblood. I like these kind of players. I don't know, because I struggle between him and Dobson and one other player, maybe like Joel Farabee or Isaac Lundestrom or something like that. But I do think that these kind of players are important for hockey team development. His comparison has been Patrice Bergeron, and well, I can't argue with that. That's that's the kind of player I want on my team. He seems to be a point per game player too. So, I don't know, Sean, do you have any information on Hayton?
Yeah, well, I think he did a good job of summing up. He definitely kind of compares to Bergeron. The only thing I worry about with Hayton is his foot speed. I know it's a bit of a knock on him, a bit of a weakness, but I mean, he pretty much has all the other tools. He's got the leadership qualities and the smarts and all that. I like him a lot. I've just learned over the years, you got to be careful with that speed kind of thing. So I do worry about that with him, but he could easily be a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who was also knocked for his skating. He could easily work hard and overcome that and become a great NHLer. So I think it's a good pick for sure.
Cool.
All right, and again, another player I don't know a lot about, but I'll have to pay a little bit more attention on this guy. Sean, who do you have at number 10?
All right, so number 10, I'm going completely off the board, Mike.
Oh, and you disagree with Kelly.
And I disagree with Kelly.
Awesome. All right.
I guess when we're putting all this together, realistically, it's funny. You go over all the drafts, and there's guys every year. There's a guy that was taken in the 20s or in the second round or the fourth round or whatever. People are like, oh, if we were to redo the draft, he would be in the top 10 kind of thing. So after going through a whole bunch of different guys and looking for certain sleepers and that, there's one guy that just keeps standing out for me. So I'm going to go ahead and put him as number 10 as the 10th most talented player in this draft. And it's Vitaly Kravtsov from Russia. He is a 17-year-old. He might be 18 now. He plays in the KHL, and he actually scored. He was the youngest player in the history of the KHL to score a playoff goal last year. He beat Evgeny Kuznetsov by like 238 days or something. I have tweeted out a bunch of highlights of him, and there's a recent highlight reel that came out there. I don't have a ton of information on him, but everything I see and hear, I love. This kid just looks, he's dynamic. He can skate like the wind. He's got a ton of moves. I mean, a 17-year-old playing in the KHL, that speaks a lot to me that he's able to be productive to begin with. And I mean, he seems to have the vision and the poise and all that. He's certainly a sleeper. Another guy that I respect a lot as far as drafts go, draft talk, is Sam Constantino. He's on Sportsnet. He's not on Twitter, unfortunately. But he tweeted out there something, or he posted something there on Sportsnet. Kravtsov is highly skilled from an offensive perspective. He's got sick skill that checks all the boxes. So for me, I have no idea how his hockey IQ is, and I'm not sure if he plays a defensive game, but just based purely on offensive skill and creativity, this guy's the next Evgeny Kuznetsov as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going a little bit off the board. It's kind of a high-risk pick, but I think from a pure talent standpoint, Vitaly Kravtsov is my number 10 pick.
Yeah, now a guy like that, right, typically could go 10 or higher, depending on. I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. Just hold on. In my opinion, a guy like that goes maybe 10 or higher, just based on how the interview goes, right?
Yeah. Well, and
you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely, again, we talked about this earlier, you definitely have to kind of consider the Russian factor too, right? Like, he is playing in the KHL. I don't know how long he signed for, but you're not getting a lot of exposure. Like, he didn't make any of the Russian international teams. So, I mean, how much are the scouts really even going to see this guy? It's possible he could be a late round pick, you're not sure, but I think he's one of those ideal sleeper guys that he's got all the skill in the world. People are like, wow, how did we miss out on this guy? So yeah, I'm definitely all over him.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely off the table on that one at number 10. What's your thoughts on that, Kelly? And be as brutal as you can with Sean.
Well, Sean obviously has a thing for Russians.
You heard it here first.
Remember, he's the one that brought us the Maximov pick. He was all over Maximov last year too.
Yeah, and I'm a big Zadorov guy too. I love Nikita Zadorov.
Yeah. So, and where did Zadorov play junior?
Somewhere around here, London.
Yeah, London, maybe. I don't know.
There's a bit of a trend here, is there?
I may not be a little bit biased.
He's got an eye for trendy Russians. So, see what Sean does is he projects long term, which is it's a talent, I tell you. So, Max, seriously though, like Zadorov took how many years to find his stride? A trade, and he's turning out really well for Colorado.
Yeah.
I think Maximov will be, if it goes the same way, it'll be the same time frame. His skating will hold him back a little bit, but he'll, the Oilers just send him down to the AHL and let him marinate down there, learn the pro game. And when he's ready to come up, I think we got a good player. I was really impressed with Maximov in the prospects tournament in the summertime.
Yeah.
I think he reminded me a little bit about Ryan Smith, like a tiny bit, for the way he sits in front of the net and kind of cleans up. But this Kravtsov kid, you know, he's playing in a league and doing pretty well that not a lot of Russian kids get to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if there's one name to look out for, maybe it's him.
And you said you tweeted out a highlight package from YouTube for him?
Krasnov, yeah, earlier today.
Yeah. It was earlier today? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was earlier today. I think it was just a goal or something, whatever. But I try and tweet out a few things there. I'm typically, just for the record, I'm typically not. I'm not the biggest fan of Russian players, to be honest, with all of them going overseas and all that. But there are, every once in a while, you get a Datsuk or an Ovechkin or Kucherov, and in this case, I'm very high on Maximov. That just kind of catch your eye, and you can't deny it. Like, just, they're fantastic players, right? So I'm really excited about Maximov as well with the Oilers.
Yeah, and everything that I've watched, and then hearing you talk about him. Have you heard any more about the skating coach or anything more about that?
Not really, but I did notice that the last few games, it seems like he's working on his defensive game a little bit more too. He doesn't seem as offensively inclined the last few games. Like he's picking up his man in the defensive zone. I don't know if he got that from the Oilers organization or what, but it's extremely encouraging that he's working. And I did mention this before in one of my posts, that even off camera, when we were at the Niagara London game, he would jump over the boards and he would literally be doing laps in his own zone, working on his skating while everybody else was on the bench. So the coaches weren't there, the cameras weren't on. He was just putting in the work. So that was really encouraging to see. But yeah, he just seems to be, focused and determined on becoming a complete player. And you can see it. And when you have a guy like that, he already has the natural ability. And again, we're talking about amazing shots. Wallstrom has a great shot in this draft. Maximov has as good a shot as anybody, as far as I'm concerned. I'd put his shot against anybody. He is, when you have a guy like that that's willing to put in the work to get better, that's exciting.
Yeah. And, guys, we're done with the top 10 on the draft. So let's just, until you're ready to hang it up for tonight, let's chat a little bit about prospects in general and who we think, Maximov, obviously, I think the three of us are all big fans. And, I've taken more of a notice of him in the last couple of months. Let's just chat. Let's chat about the Oilers prospects and who's coming up. I put the tweet out there. I don't know if Yamamoto's played, if he played today or not. I want to check that out. He was on an 11-game tear, 27 points. Of course, 9 of those points came in his last 2. Last time I looked. Have you guys been following this? The kid, since he's got back from the World Juniors, has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say that, I don't know what was going on with the coaching at the beginning of the year, because they separated Yamamoto and another kid, an LA draft pick named Anderson Dolan, and they separated them for some reason. And they put them back together after the World Juniors, and as soon as they did that, they started lighting it up again. So I think he's playing with skilled players.
Yeah, so I regret his point scoring streak is now over. The Blazers in Kamloops stopped them. But Spokane is tearing it up too, right? Like, they won 3-1 tonight.
There you go. Hopefully they get into the playoffs then, because they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't do anything at to help their team with the trade deadline. So. Yeah,
there's some good. The CHL in general this year, I think, is there's some really, really good teams. It's going to be exciting Memorial Cup. right, when it does come. What you guys, anybody else sort of in the Oilers organization that you've either of you been looking at that pretty exciting right now?
Well, Caleb Jones for sure. I think he's. I love what he's doing in Bakersfield, and you just the limited times I've seen him play, he just looks like a player, right? And all indications are he's coming along great, and it looks like. I know not this summer, but next summer, Sekera and Russell, both their no movement clauses turn into limited no trade clauses, and I think it's very possible by next summer that one or both of those guys are moved, and Caleb Jones earns a spot on the Oilers roster. I like the way he's progressing nicely.
Yeah, Kelly, any thoughts on anybody maybe other than Caleb Jones that you've been pretty impressed with or been following?
I think with Jones, he's going to need another year or two in the minors to work on his overall game. He's got the tools to succeed at the pro level, but he needs to work on his decision making and things like that. Whereas Ethan Bear needs to work on his tools a little bit. His boots are lacking, but his shot isn't right. He produces at the NHL level offensively, but we're not sure if his skating will translate to the NHL very well. So you don't really hoping he turns into another Brad Hunt, but it's possible. He was a WHL Defenseman of the Year though, so his skating can't be that bad. I'm interested to see what they do with the goaltending next year, especially if Brossois down there still and Ellis is down there, and they'll want Starrett to come up at some point from the ECHL. Then I think Dylan Wells is eligible. Yeah, he'll be in the organization next season. So they have a glut of goalies. They're going to have to figure out what to do with the young ones. So don't be surprised if we see one or even two of those get moved out. Plus Montoya's another year on his contract. So.
Yeah, I think Brossois will be on. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone by the trade deadline, and then you just move Starrett up to the AHL, and then Wells goes to ECHL next year or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're both RFAs, right? All their goaltenders. Starrett's the only one whose contract doesn't expire this summer.
Yeah, I would. Starrett's a guy that I really want to see. Like he's, when he's moved up. And he only played, I think, maybe a game and a half, if that. Maybe he's only played the one game, but he was pretty outstanding that game. I think, may only have had one goal against him, but he's a kid that I'd like to see in net and play a few games at least as a backup and for. Why am I forgetting our AHL team's name? Bakersfield, yeah, the Condors. I was thinking Condor as the city, and then, Starrett's definitely one I'd like to see come up and play backup. What do you guys think of? And maybe you haven't seen him play that much. I've watched a couple of games that he's been in, and I'm waiting for him. I don't think he's back in Calgary anytime soon to play against the Hitmen, but Cameron Hebig, the center that we signed just recently, like you, Sean, you've got obviously been a big fan of the London Knights. I've been a big fan of the Blades. I know Hebig got traded to the Pats, but the Blades are, I've had some family play for them, and then I lived in Saskatoon for a few years. So the Blades have always had I've always been a fan of the Blades. But Cameron Hebig is he's a good center, decent size. You guys watched or followed this guy at all?
Yeah, I haven't seen him at all. Sorry, go ahead.
I haven't spent a lot of time looking at them, but like these, I don't know how many of these like overage junior signings that take place in the middle of the season actually pan out. To me, he sounds like Chad Butcher. You know what I mean? Was performing well in the juniors, and then has yet to find his game in the pro. Right, so that's like worst case scenario. Probably is he just turns into like a really good ECHL, AHL player, but can't figure it out in the pros. But they're worth taking a risk on, right? He's a right-handed centerman, which the Oilers need in their system, and he's scoring as an overager in juniors, and that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, this is a kid that I think will play some time in Bakersfield, and then we'll get a better idea. I've been a fan of his for a little while now, and he's still continuing to score. He's 20 years old or 21 years old, and a good kid. Any other? I mean, you've seen Safin play. I think. Sean, what's your thought on him? I mean, he's one of the kids that went out to the World Juniors and played some games, or anybody else. I mean, there's such a. I actually, after we started this podcast and the last time I had you guys on, I've been following the prospects certainly more than I ever have, and we've got a pretty deep pool of prospects. I'm actually a little bit. I'm hoping that a couple of them stick next year. It might make, signings and everything else that much easier, especially if the salary cap goes up. But I looked at it, I had the LA Kings guy there, Jesse, from All the Kingsmen podcast. And while he was quite humorous to listen to, I was trying to poke him and prod him a little bit because the Kings seem a little bereft of prospects. Edmonton, I just feel like we've got actually a good sort of base of talent sitting there in the wings. I'm hoping a couple of those guys like Maximov and Jones or Bear or somebody shows something. Yamamoto, you'd expect to be up next year, but anybody, Sean, have you seen Safin, or is there anybody else that kind of?
Well, yeah, I mean, people knock Chiarelli a lot, but I mean, I think he's done a pretty good job as far as drafts go. I mean, even guys like Pagan and Svoboda that were in the 7th round, I mean, they were projecting well, and then, for whatever reason, it didn't work out, but they were all quality picks. As far as Safin goes, I haven't really watched a lot. He plays in the queue. I mean, he's a big guy, and I see he's got almost a point per game. The -17, I don't know if that speaks to their lousy team or what, but one guy that I wrote a thing on there a while ago was Samorukov as a defenseman that was taken with Maximov last year in the draft. And for some reason, there's a Russian theme to this podcast, but with Samorukov, he's actually one of those guys that seems like he has mentally checked out. He does seem like he's the guy. I mean, he's got all the talent in the world offensively, and he was projecting well. But one of the knocks in his draft year was a lack of consistency, that he would kind of take nights off or whatever and have mental lapses. And I've seen a lot of that this year. So that was a little bit discouraging to see because, he does have a lot of offensive talent, especially, but he just doesn't seem like his heart's in it. And he has in the KHL, the CSKA Moscow has his KHL rights, and he's got a lot of friends there, and I think family own the team. So it seems like he's already kind of planned his future. I mean, he'll play out his OHL career, but we'll see what happens. But I wouldn't get too high on him. But I haven't seen him play a lot either. But one guy we forgot to mention is Tyler Benson, who seems to be lighting it up in the WHL. I don't know. Have either of you guys seen him play much lately?
I was at a Giants game and saw him play, and he's outstanding, right? Like, that's the thing. In the WHL right now, you've got two of the top guys, and they were, I think, first and second star last week, or our Oilers prospects, right? I mean, you got Benson and you got Yamamoto. I mean, if you're really going to be down on Chiarelli, you can't. This is not the reason. Right? Just exactly what you said. I mean, these guys are they're lighting it up in the WHL, and we've got some good players in the OHL and everywhere. But Benson has been outstanding. I watched him play. He is really good. He's everything you think he is, and I'm actually pretty excited about seeing him in training camp.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would worry about is I don't know about his foot speed either. I know there's a bit of a knock on his skating, but I mean, if he can overcome that, it seems like he's got a bright future.
Yeah, and they're I love you. Yeah, the motorcycle, or they're either street racing outside your place there.
You gotta wait till like the middle of the night in the summertime. There's like 2 or 3 in the morning, because by my house is like I don't know how you call it. It's like a elevated highway, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a straightaway past my apartment building. And so there's street races that go on in the summertime. So you hear them coming from kilometers away. So, yeah, what are you gonna do? So I think a couple guys we should watch out for are in Sweden right now: Philip Berglund and William Legason. Legason more so because he's probably he'll probably come over a lot sooner than Berglund. But Berglund's got size. He's a right-handed shot, and he's an offensive defenseman. Legason's your gritty, shot blocking Swede. Left shooting, 6'2", 200 pounds. So these are a couple of guys that could be on their way over.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to see. I would love to see one of these defenders vie for a spot next year on the team. Be great if a prospect really kind of made a push. I talking about the Kern Oilers, one of my biggest disappointments this year is Benning.
Yeah,
and he seems just doesn't seem to have it this year, and a lot of giveaways, and so I think, and he's sitting there right now, I think 5th or 6th on the depth chart, depending on where you put Davidson and him. But if somebody came in and just kind of showed what they had, I think they could easily take that spot as the 7th D on the team.
Yeah.
One guy, speaking of D, is John Marino, and we were talking about Wahlstrom. Marino's in Harvard, and Wahlstrom, that's where he's going to go play. So it might be exciting to see the two of them together.
Smart kid.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on Benning, he seems to have like he panics easily. You know what I mean? He'll get the puck in his own zone. He'll turn around, and with any forechecking, he'll just pin it on the back wall, or he'll just give it up quite easily, right? I think any defenseman with skating and size and a panic threshold that's NHL level could overtake him easily.
That's to me, that's confidence, right? Like, and we've been hard on McClellan, but that's a McClellan thing. That's a coaching thing, in my mind. I mean, you got to find a way to get that kid to have some confidence. But yeah, I think you're right.
There's no problem sitting him either. They refuse to put guys in the press box for a few games, right? When I was growing up, players sat in the press box sometimes. They had a bad game, you sat in the press box. You had to watch, you had to see what's going on. And it gave other guys opportunities, and they just simply don't do that anymore with the young players. I'm not sure what they're scared about with Benning, but like there's no problem. We have Ovidu. If he can play, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, don't disagree.
Yeah. Just one last thing I wanted to mention with the, as far as we're talking about the prospects, I mean, you have to kind of, as an Oilers fan, you have to kind of be excited. I mean, if you look at just the future, let's just say even up front, I mean, Puljujarvi's cracked the team this year. You're hoping and anticipating Yamamoto's going to crack the team next year. And the year after that, hopefully one of Benson or Maximoff will crack the team. And then hopefully the year after that, the other one will. So I think Chiarelli's kind of set himself up, and that's what kind of gets me with this year. with the Oilers struggling so much. A lot of people are calling for the GM's head, but you got to at least let his draft picks play out and see what he's doing. In my opinion, if you look at the last draft he had before he left Boston, he didn't even have, he had the 25th overall pick, and he didn't even have a third or sixth round pick, I think. And he ended up drafting David Pastrnak late in the first round.
Yeah.
Second round, he's got this kid, Ryan Donato, who's a highly touted kid. And Danton Heinen was his third or fourth round pick, and he's doing awesome in Boston. Even the seventh round pick is down in the farm system. So, he's done a really good job. We got Jones and Bear guys coming on defense, but up front, literally, and this is extremely important for a salary cap team. You're going to need guys on entry level contracts, and if you look at every year moving forward, it projects. It looks like we're going to have at least one young, dynamic forward coming in every year, and that's what you need to be successful as a cap team. So, I'm not sure fans they really kind of take that into consideration this year based on the results. They're just like, well, let's just fire the team because, we got Ryan Strome instead of Jordan Eberle. But, you got to look at the big picture, and I think realistically, there is a disconnect between the coach and the GM. I think Draisaitl should have been a center when they put him at wing, whatever. But I think you got to cut the GM some slack because the Oilers do have a bright future moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I got into it with somebody just the other day, and we said, look, if there's some clear highlights from this year. RNH is one of them. And then Nurse also, he's just progressed into, I think, just a great D-man. I'm a big Nurse fan after this year. I was a big fan last year, so I guess that wasn't much of a stretch. But, you want to keep him and put a contract under him and keep RNH, because I would have a hard time trading Nugent Hopkins after the season he's had so far. You got to have somebody come up from the ranks to play. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to afford all these guys. And that means good, prospect pool. And I think we have that. I'm pretty confident about that. Kelly, what's your thoughts on that?
I think we're getting there. I'm not impressed with the current AHL squad at the moment too much, but I think starting next year, the job that Chiarelli and his staff have done will start to trickle in and populate that roster a little bit. I think Sean makes a good point that fans see what's right in front of their faces first, right? And they complain about that immediately. Instead of looking at what he's doing, what Chiarelli's doing long term, which is building the system. I don't even know if you can say building it back up, because I'm not sure the Oilers ever had a feeding system.
Yeah.
Because they lived off the Glory Boys for the 80s and 90s and traded for their young stars in the 90s into the 2000s, and so maybe for the first time in franchise history, we're starting to get a real system starting to build up right now. One concern obviously is that they need to develop these players. It's fine to draft them and for them to perform well in junior or college or Europe, but when they come over, the Oilers have to have the right staff in place to develop them at the minor league level. And if we have a coach at that level who's more concerned with winning than developing, that's going to be a problem. And I wonder if that's what we have right now with the amount of AHL veterans on that team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are good points. And, Bakersfield certainly hasn't been providing us, at least this year, with a number of guys to move up and do anything with. I wouldn't mind seeing Ratty, up for one or two games, especially if we're out of the playoffs. What is it, a race to 6 now if we got 6 losses? we're pretty much done. So I'll be counting those down.
We have a guy like Lelegia.
Yeah.
And I think he was runner-up for the Hobie Baker when Eichel won. This is a good hockey player, and he just can't seem to catch a break, right?
Yeah.
There's no amount of injuries or struggling forwards on the Edmonton Oilers will allow him a call-up for some reason.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see some of these guys in the tail end of this season, depending on where we're at. Guys, one last question, and then maybe we'll just call it a night. Getting late for Sean, and it's actually getting late out here in the West too. So, we're fast approaching the deadline. Maroon, there's been talk that he might re-sign. Maybe I'll start with you, Kelly. I think Maroon's probably the biggest question mark as a GM. What Chiarelli's going to do? What would you do with Maroon at the deadline this year?
Oh, I would absolutely trade him. If they're talking about re-signing and that's a thing, I would go to him and say, hey, look, you want to win? We'll send you to a place that has a good chance of winning the Stanley Cup. And if you want to come back next season, we'll have you back. Because we've already, laid down the roadwork for the negotiations. So I would deal him out for the what I can get. Hopefully, like I've heard some people say third rounders for Maroon. I would hope you can get something a little higher than that. Might have to wait out the other GMs.
Yeah,
and see what guys like Hoffman or Pacioretty or who else, maybe Tatar or something like that. See what prices these players are going for. If the worst is a third rounder, well, you get a third round pick, and then you're sorted. I think Letestu is pretty much gone. Camilleri, he's playing on the first line for some reason, so that tells me that they're showcasing him for a trade. I can't see him getting better than a 5th round pick.
Yeah.
I think they'd be good to move some of their RFA defensemen out to make room for the juniors that are going to graduate. Maybe move a goalie too. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, that would be a big move for sure. Maybe we'd see Benning go though, which I wouldn't be hurt on that. And then I want to get your opinion on Maroon. But one thing before we close it off for tonight, 2 games, Pakarinen has been outstanding in my mind, playing limited minutes. He's been noticeable out there. Anyway, just wanted to say that. Sean, thoughts on the Maroon situation before the deadline?
Yeah, well, I love Pac-Man too. A lot of people question why he should be on the team, but I mean, he definitely plays a role. As far as Maroon goes, I mean, it's the fact he's not playing with McDavid and they've got Camilleri playing up there tells me they want to re-sign him. But I mean, if I'm the Oilers, it's got to be a dirt cheap hometown discount. And I mean, even so, why wouldn't you just trade him for something, send him to a contender, and then just revisit it in the summer? I mean, it happens all the time. I don't, from an Oilers standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. Even if I know he loves Edmonton and whatever, but you just say, okay, well, that's fine. We'll talk to you again in the summer, but we're getting you out of here. We're doing what's best for the team. If you care about the team and you want to play for the team, well, then you should be for this move because we're trying to improve our team by moving you and getting, an asset for you. So I think it's pretty much a no-brainer. And just on Benning, one thing that a good friend of mine, Supernova, on Twitter always constantly reminds me is never really count out a defenseman until he's played 300 games. And I know Benning is very frustrating this year, and he's having a sophomore slump for sure. But he played pretty good last year, and it's you got to be a little bit careful with these young guys. You don't want to give up on them too early. I do agree he does need to maybe sit for a little bit, but I wouldn't completely throw him under the bus yet. I think he's smart enough, and he's got the hockey pedigree that I think he'll eventually figure it out. He's just going through a slump right now, so I wouldn't totally give up on the player.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. He's still a pretty young kid. Having Davidson back there doing, I think, reasonably well, though, is maybe made me think otherwise. But I don't. It doesn't look like they're ready to give up on him anyway.
Don't forget, he's got a 101 mile an hour slap shot.
That's true.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right. That was a bit surprising.
Pakarinian's got a bomb too.
He's got a 100 mile an hour snapshot.
So, guys, I think we're going to end it there. I want to say a couple things before I end, because hockey is a big part of my life. I've told you guys I play about 5-6 games a week, and very into the game, and I do the podcast and do a number of other things. One of the things I joined this year, because I've played in the tournament in Vancouver a few times, is Hockey Helps the Homeless. So I am on the committee here in Calgary, and I'll be promoting that for my Calgary friends and anybody that wants to come out to Calgary. It is bar none the best tournament that I've ever played in. They just do it up right. Everybody gets their own jerseys. You can put a team in, or you can enter on your own, and a good deal of the money that's raised goes to homeless initiatives in the city or area that they're in. I believe they might even have a Hockey Helps the Homeless tournament in London. I know for a fact they do not have one in Taipei, but it is a fantastic tournament and a great cause. I'm always amazed at all of the things that hockey in Canada does to support any number of initiatives. There's one other thing that's coming up, and Brian Trottier just is going to be a part of, which is Connected North tournament, and this is going to happen in Ontario. I'm probably going to make the trip out to go play, and this is about getting tools and technology out to our Indigenous communities through video technology in the North, and that's another thing that's really great. And again, hockey playing a big part in helping with that. So, guys, if you as we get closer to these tournaments and that, I'm going to be, advertising them on Twitter. Certainly would like your support in good causes, both of them. But I'm just always impressed when, the whole hockey community, how they get behind a good cause. And just a great part of being Canadian or involved in hockey. But anyway, wanted to put that out there.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it is in London as well, and I know last year there was a bunch of NHLers and former NHLers that came out here and supported it too. So it's definitely a great cause.
Yeah, and upcoming schedule, and you guys can probably talk about some of these folks, but I'm going to have Oilers Nerd Alert on. He's a stats guy. You mentioned your friend there. What was his name, Sean?
Supernova.
Yeah, Supernova has agreed to be a guest. I've also got Vegas, Sinbin.Vegas coming on next week prior to the Oilers and the Golden Knights. So that'll be fun. I've got Paige, who goes by the at Noorzy, Noorzy. She's going to be on the show next week. And then I've got an old high school guy that I went to school with, who happened to play a few games for the Edmonton Oilers, Jason Stredwick, on as well next week. So lots of different pods scheduled. And as always, I do hope to get you two on again, because this was a lot of fun. And it's the last time was a lot of fun. This time's a lot of fun, and I'm always learning something as we go. So if you guys will agree to be back on, then you're guaranteed to be back on.
No problem.
Anytime, Mike.
I'd be happy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Have a great night, and thanks for being part of the show today.
Always.
No problem. Have a good one.
Oilers Live.